answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. This is a remarkable statement, even for when did you stop beating your wife, Neil Steinberg. Neil Steinberg is an apparatchik with state-run media talking about the NPR Times. You may remember it as the Sun-Times. He wrote in writing about, and he's inconsequential, but it's indicative of what happens when the media folds in with the state, as the NPR Times has. So he's a good example of the bad example. Not to mention, when you say a statement like I'm about to offer you from Neil Steinberg, everybody on the left should be held to account for what he says, just like every Republican has to answer for anything that is controversial that Trump or any other Republican says. Neil Steinberg writing in the NPR Times, if I had a choice between getting rid of Hamas and getting rid of Netanyahu, I'd choose Netanyahu.
Oh, my God.
So he flacks for the new Bolsheviks in Chicago and genocidal terrorists overseas. That's what Neil Steinberg does. Self-loathing, hate-mongering, apparatchik in one of the outposts of the D.C. press corps, talking about Chicago.
Well, that's just an ignorant statement.
He tried to qualify it.
By how? Doing what?
Saying, well, what I mean is there's always going to be another terrorist group, but I can't imagine a worse leader for Israel than Netanyahu.
Hamas just murdered an American and 5 others, hostages. But okay.
Not to mention 1,200 Israelis on October 7th.
And raped women in front of their children.
The logic, though. There's always going to be another terrorist group, but I can't think of a worse leader than Netanyahu. So you choose a terrorist group to stay and a politician to go. I mean, that is just a stunning statement. And it will receive no critical review in Chicago outside of this show, which is why I'm profiling it. Karol Markowicz is a columnist for the New York Post. She's also the co-author of Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. And she's the host of the Karol Markowicz Show on iHeartRadio. Karol, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
I mean, you know, I'd love to have somebody from Florida by way of New York comment on Neil Steinberg's comment. I mean, this is the sort of, I mean, that's sort of something that few people would say out loud, but they feel emboldened to say something like that.
Yeah, it's, Netanyahu derangement syndrome is not wildly different from Trump derangement syndrome in the U.S. Yeah. Netanyahu keeps getting elected by the Israeli people. Whatever else you think of them, they're a democratic country who have chosen this leader. And look, I have my problems with Netanyahu, but once you're comparing Netanyahu to a terrorist group, I think you might have gone too far. I think you might have lost the plot. It's possible you do not have control over your emotions anymore, no ability to reason. I think that's where Neil Steinberg is.
Yeah, I think that's a proper diagnosis. Dr. Karol Markowicz joining us.
That's right. I missed my calling.
Yeah, very good. Speaking of agitprop from the left, I found this New York Times piece uproarious, as I normally do. It's my favorite comedy rag. Conservatives fighting over Reagan's legacy overlook what made him successful. New York Times, this columnist from the National Interest, which is a left-wing rag who wrote this op-ed, very concerned about Reagan's legacy and its stewardship. Very, very concerned about it. And they're very worried about this alleged schism within the Republican ranks over who are the rightful heirs to Reagan's legacy, the Trump and Trump supporters, or the never-Trumpers like Bill Kristol and Liz Cheney, who are voting for Kamala Harris. Real close call.
Yeah, who could tell? Again, it doesn't matter what you think of Donald Trump. The Republican Party has chosen him as their nominee. They elected him in 2016. They picked him again in 2020. The idea that Reagan would rebel against what the party wanted is insane to me. I mean, Reagan had the 11th commandment, don't talk bad about Republicans. He was absolutely a guy who would be in favor of what his party chose.
Well, and not right, and not to mention he wouldn't, even if he disagreed with, say, somebody who called his economic supply side economic philosophy voodoo economics as his running mate did, he wouldn't be running over to support Jimmy Carter or Michael Dukakis.
Right, of course, absolutely, that's the case. And I like to imagine Reagan hearing the words unrealized capital gains and having to explain that, oh yeah, the money you haven't made yet, you're going to be taxed on that. And that's the candidate that you will support under your philosophy. I mean, I could, imagine telling that to Ronald Reagan.
Now, next week is the big week where Governor Cuomo, or former Governor Cuomo, is going to be testifying before a Republican committee about his undoings during COVID. And I just can't help but I think people need to remember that he received an Emmy in recognition with his leadership. He wrote a best-selling book called American Crisis: Leadership Lessons from the COVID-19 Pandemic. But what he tried to cover up, and what we hope is going to be exposed next week, is the fact that he put positive COVID patients back into nursing homes.
Yeah. And, what you forgot, Amy, he also made himself a commemorative poster about how he defeated COVID in New York. And this was like September 2020. Obviously, New York would have much more death and many more cases after that. But
do you have a signed copy of that?
I should. I really should. I know people who do have the poster hanging up as, in irony. One thing to remember about the Cuomo directive to introduce COVID-positive patients back into nursing homes is that even in March 2020, we knew who was most susceptible to COVID. We knew it was the elderly. So nobody can say, oh, we didn't know, we had no idea. We had a lot of idea. And the truth is, beyond just doing that, they covered it up, which is unbelievable, except entirely believable in retrospect based on the way he behaved. But they accused the Ron DeSantis administration in Florida of covering up deaths. And that's literally what they did. They underestimated the number of nursing home deaths by around 40%, and they lied to everyone. And they only apologized to two Democrats who were having a tougher election because of these lies.
Maybe they were getting advice and counsel from Chinese Communist Party assets like Kathy Hochul was.
That's right. Yeah. And, I want to know how deep that story goes, because there's a lot of possibility that China manipulated what we did during COVID. I want to know who they talked to. I want to know where they worked. But this is just the start of it.
Yeah. Since you write so much about K through 12 education, I just wanted to get your reaction to what happened in Georgia yesterday, the school shooting where the shooter killed 4 people. And, and are we having the fulsome conversation about the full panoply of issues with respect to safety in schools that we should be? We talked a little bit in the show, for example, about something that RFK Jr. has brought up, actually, which is 40% of teens with a mental health diagnosis and the number of kids on Adderall and the studies about Adderall that suggest it increases the incidence of psychosis. It still doesn't, it's still a small percentage, but a small percentage of millions of kids on Adderall can be a problem, and it's certainly part of the conversation, I think. Your sort of general view on how we're addressing this.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. We're not addressing this. The shooter was known to law enforcement. That's something we hear all the time. Like, when someone is known to law enforcement, I think you need to take far greater care in making sure that they don't get access to weapons, making sure that they can't bring those weapons to school. And I just think, the conversation always goes to legal gun rights, and that's absolutely not the case. I'm sure we're going to find out that this person had guns illegally, and that's, neither here nor there with gun laws. So this pretense that we can get rid of all guns, obviously, is something that comes up after every shooting, after every tragedy. Obviously, it's extremely tragic, but we need to, root causes is what this is all about and what it's been about for a long time.
What are you anticipating, looking forward to, fearing, any of the above about Tuesday night's debate?
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to underestimate Kamala Harris. I think that we haven't seen great debates from her, but that doesn't mean that she can't be prepped for this one. I hope the Trump campaign is ready for her to be a stronger debater than they've seen. Really, just I'd love to hear policy. I know that's unlikely, but a girl can dream.
Yeah, right. I mean, it'd be nice if Trump, I mean, even in his own way, given how limited he is to sort of change his stripes at this stage, can play the role of a moderator, which is an observation that many have made, but I was the first to make it. No, I'm kidding. But and really just probe, just ask questions in a very neutral way. You were here and you did these things. Now you're saying you're here. Just explain that to us. You can do that over and over again for 90 minutes.
And I'd love to see a calm Trump, similar to what we saw during the Biden debate. I think he can really bring it if he can maintain that attitude. I don't know. I think he's a really good debater overall. I think he did a great job dismantling Hillary. He has had good debates in the past. I don't know. I think if he can maintain calm, which I know for Donald Trump is a bit of a challenge, I really think he can have a good night.
Karol Markowicz is a columnist for the New York Post, co-author of Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. And she's also the host of the Karol Markowicz Show on iHeartRadio. Karol, thank you as always.
Thank you so much, guys. Love being on with you.
Thank you. We love to have you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is Sean Thompson. When you go on vacation, does it make sense to have somebody else pack for you? Of course not. The same can be said for your retirement. Your 401k could be packed with things you don't know about or even need. If you're close to retirement, but you don't have a plan customized to your goals, it's like kind of taking a 30-year vacation with no idea what's in the suitcase. Sounds